Modern physics defines the photon with mathematical precision as the massless gauge boson of the electromagnetic field, a quantized unit of energy that mediates all electromagnetic interaction. While robust, this description treats the photon as a functional unit of exchange, leaving it orphaned from any deeper architectural understanding of reality. Standard physics explains what the photon does, but the ontological meaning behind its properties remains an empty bracket. To fill that gap, we have to look past how the photon operates and ask what its structure reveals about the underlying architecture of reality. The PSOC 4.3 framework identifies the photon as a quantum of phase-unbound coherence. This table maps standard physical properties onto phase-spatial ontology. Zero rest mass and speed c are consequences of a system not phase-bound into localized closure. Energy is quantized phase order. Because a photon transfers this coherence, a rest frame is undefined. The photon represents the minimal event by which reality becomes transmissible without condensing into mass closure. Physical reality is organized by coherent states rather than discrete objects occupying an empty container of space. This structure is the core triad: matter, light, and gravity. Matter is coherence held. It exists as phase-bound closure, yielding localized persistence, inertia, and rest mass. Light is coherence released. This state is phase-unbound, the purely transmissive disclosure of source structure. Light and matter share an identical substrate. They are simply different structural states of closure. This 9-step continuum bridges the gap between pure, undisclosed coherence and massive matter under gravitational constraint. Steps 1 through 3 comprise the unbound regime. Here, phase and spatial relations emerge, though they lack individuated identity or mass. Step 4 is the exact threshold of the photon, the final stage of transmissive release before condensation begins. Moving down the ladder, shareable bosonic fields collapse into ferromonic individuation and eventually mass closure. A photon lacks a rest frame by absolute necessity. It exists on the precise threshold of condensation. To become observable, the universe must mathematically couple a system's internal phase with spatial orientation. The U1 generator provides the internal phase order relation, physically measured as frequency. Spatial orientation is provided by the SO3 generator, manifesting as the geometric alignment of polarization. This equation defines the photon as a discrete event of phase order transfer. The photon is the precise quantum location where abstract internal gauge phase is translated into spatially transmissible reality. The light cone boundary, defined by the null interval, represents the absolute geometry of coherence permission. Within this geometry, the photon acts as an epistemic messenger, executing a strict coherence transaction from bound source to bound receiver. Internal source structures are encoded into the unbound frequency and polarization of the traveling signal. These spectral lines record permitted closure transitions, the structural grammar by which matter communicates its state. This null interval is precisely what allows the internal architecture of distant stars to be reconstructed by observers on Earth. Gravity, the final element of the triad, acts as a structural closure constraint on both matter and light. Even without rest mass, light remains subject to the rigid geometry of the universe, and that curvature extracts a heavy toll. As the wave elongates, gravitational redshift is a coherence cost, forcefully reducing the disclosure rate of phase coherence as it escapes a gravity well. The photon curves. Gravitational lensing is a path reorientation, modifying the spatial trajectory without interacting with mass. Gravity exerts a universal geometric tax on how fast and where coherence is permitted to propagate. We have traced the progression from undisclosed potential to a measurable universe via the photon threshold. This framework maps the core triad, the math of disclosure, and the closure ladder into a single architecture. The photon disclosure theorem states that the photon is the minimum viable bridge connecting quantum discreteness to relativistic continuity. The photon is coherence made light, the sole mechanism by which the universe makes its own existence observable.